largest gas hikes, this request in Illinois history. And here to talk more about this with me is Al Hollenbeck. First of all, Al, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for breaking all of this down. Let's start with this. How will this increase? I'm looking at this. It says that it would raise customers' water rates by $314.66 million, or around $90 a year per customer. Tell me, what does that mean for the average senior? How much money is that, and how does it impact their bottom line?
Well, for many of our members on Social Security, fixed income, it's a lot. And it's just another example of costs, whether it be prescriptions, rent, food, medical care, they're making it harder for our members to do what they want to do to you. They want to age in place. They want to stay in their homes, and they want to stay in their apartments. This one, NICOR, is particularly unreasonable. They have now made 5 rate requests increase in the last 7 years. If this one is approved as submitted, their rates will go up 115%. The Social Security cost of living in that same 7 years, 22%. So you can see why seniors and our members are struggling with aging in place with the rapid increase in utility bills.
You know, I know you're talking about that fixed income, but as we talk about things going up, you know, if you're a senior, you may be on, you may have prescriptions that you need filled. Housing has gone up significantly depending on where you live. Essentials like food is up. Tell me how AARP is being an advocate for those seniors. I know more than 35 of the customers for NICOR gas specifically, they wrote to AARP of Illinois to talk about this increase and how it will impact them. Tell me how you're being an advocate for those 35,000 plus voices.
Sure. First of all, we survey our members, and they consistently tell us they are struggling with the financial ability to age in place. And 35,000 of them responded by either filling out our petition or mailing in a postcard. And it's those petitions and postcards that we hand delivered today to the Commerce Commission. Because the final decision on a regulated monopoly, that's what NICOR gas is made by the Illinois Commerce Commission. Our role is to make sure that the Commission hears these stories from our members. Make sure that the Commission understands that it's not just the bonuses for NICOR executives, and it's not just the rate of return for shareholders that should be considered in a final rate increase. It should be the needs of the customers. And we have 900,000 AARP members in the NICOR service area. So our role is to listen to them and to make sure that these stories are told to the Commerce Commission, not just today with delivering petitions, but also on 2 prior public hearings, and also when we have actually been able to testify directly to the Commerce Commission.
You know, I'm looking at, you know, the reasons of why NICOR has given to why they need to do these increases. And I just want to read off some of what the company has said and get your reaction to it. The company says the increase is needed to fund infrastructure upgrades and modernization of its gas delivery system, meeting regulatory and safety standards and maintaining reliable services. And then they also say preparing for evolving customer needs and energy market changes like clean energy goals, future of gas, etc. What do you make of that? And in this case, what do you think should happen with these seniors? Do you think they should freeze the rates?
No, we're not asking for a freeze, but back to your first question, what they didn't mention is the large amount of this rate increase is tied to A, executive bonuses, and B, guaranteed profitability to shareholders. It has nothing to do with infrastructure. It has nothing to do with customer service. It's just corporate greed.
Al, when it comes to, I know you said that you have been really voicing these concerns to the Illinois Commerce Commission, and you say they have the final say. Could they freeze the rates specifically for seniors, or could they freeze the rates overall? What would be their position in all of this if the right thing is done?
I'm not aware that they have the legal right to freeze rates for just one class of customers. They do have the legal right to completely reject the rate increase. That is not likely to happen, and we aren't advocating a 0% increase in rates because, as they pointed out, they do have a gas infrastructure that needs to be upgraded. It's the magnitude of this rate increase that's inappropriate. And then we have to remember that they will likely be back next year with another rate increase. I mean, they've had 5 requests in the last 7 years. So extreme moderation would be our request.
And really, where does it stop, right? I get your point. So, Al, you're the AARP Illinois State President, but you're a national organization. Are you seeing these rate increases across the board, or is Illinois specifically being hit really hard by this?
Well, Illinois is being hit really hard, but no, I can't make the case that this isn't going on in numerous other states. Um, Typically, these utilities are regulated at the state level because they are a monopoly. And they seem to have a game plan, which is numerous rate requests way beyond what can be justified, and then come back next year for another one. We're seeing that in more than just the state of Illinois. But as Illinois AARP, obviously, our focus is on utilities in Illinois regulated by the Illinois Commerce Commission.
Al, based off of what you've seen, has this always been an issue? And is it one of those situations where people just normally pay it, but this particular time, with everything else being already so expensive, people are like, no, we've had enough. We don't want to pay any more than we've already paid at this point.
It's been really the last 5 or 6 years that you really even heard people, seniors, talking about utility bills. But with these, it's not just NICOR, it's People's Gas. And anybody that opened their electric bill this summer, had a heart attack. So it's the utilities in general in the last 5, 6, 7 years have dramatically increased their requests for higher rates. And now we're seeing that with significant monthly bills. But no, prior to that, it was down pretty low on the list compared to prescriptions and healthcare and food and everything else. But now it's risen to the point that our members have said enough is enough. I can't keep paying this much.
What will happen, Al, if no decision, I guess, is ultimately made, if the rates aren't frozen in place specifically for seniors, if there isn't some type of compromise here? What will that look like for some of the seniors that you've spoken about? Is this really an uphill battle at this point?
Coupled with looming reductions in nationwide federally funded benefits to seniors, it's just another case where it's going to be harder for seniors to age in place. The other thing our members don't want to do is be a burden to their children. And right now, that's becoming harder and harder.
Al, I remember growing up right here in Chicago, there were programs that could assist you, when you couldn't afford your electricity bill or your gas bill, and in some cases, your water bill. Are some of those programs gone too as a result of some of these federal cuts that you're speaking of?
No, the programs aren't gone. But number one, the low-income programs are not funded out of NICOR profits. They're funded out of everybody else paying their gas bill. But just as importantly, there just isn't enough money in that low-income pipeline to truly cover the needs. It's just way too small in relationship to the size of the need.
Is this one of those situations, Al, where if something isn't done, Some of our seniors will have to decide, well, I can't afford, this grocery run this week, so I'll have to scale back on that. I can't afford this particular medicine. Maybe it's something for my heart or glaucoma, for example. Will it be one of those situations where we will see seniors having to make, tough decisions about their livelihoods, how they live, how they exist?
Tia, we're already there. We're already in that situation. This would just aggravate it even further.
Al, tell me about some of those stories. You say we're already there, and I do believe that, considering how overwhelming things are costing for people that are currently working. Maybe they are not in a fixed income situation, but they're currently working multiple jobs, and it's already hard. Walk me through some of your seniors that you've had a chance to speak with, and really what their life looks like right now with being, burdened with all of these extra things that they're now paying for.
Well, a lot of them rely on Social Security for a very high percentage of their income. The Social Security cost of living increases, there've been a few up years, but it's typically 2 to 3% increase. So they've been dealing with these rapidly increasing costs, prescriptions, food, medical costs, utility bills. I mean, the list goes on and on for several years now, but it's ramping up. That disconnect between their income is becoming greater than their ability to pay their bills. And we hear from members all the time, they're looking at picking up the prescription or going to the grocery store. They're looking at very, very difficult trade-offs. And this is not, one in a million situations. This is a growing percentage of seniors in Illinois.
Wow, that's a lot of people too. I know you've delivered these 35,000 petitions from older adults to the Illinois Commerce Commission. Are you expecting to hear back from the commission? Have they given you a timeline on their review process? What's kind of the next phase in all of this? What happens?
They will be making a final ruling in the next 30 days on the final approved level of rate increase. That's the process. We have done everything we can at this point to make noise and to make it clear to the commission what the impact of their decision will be.
I know we're talking 35,000 older adults. Do you think there is more? I know you touch the hand of many of them and you speak for many of them. Do you think there are even more than that are out there that maybe didn't fill out this some of these petitions, but they're going to be impacted by this too?
Absolutely. And stop and think right now. In today's environment, getting 35,000 people to A, agree on something, and to B, follow up with sending a petition or mailing in a postcard. That's very difficult to do. So yes, there's a lot more than 35,000 that are in that situation. And that speaks to, the power of AARP and our ability to tell these stories to the Commerce Commission, backed up by the 900,000 members that we have in Illinois that are NICOR customers.
You're right. You said something very, I would say, very true in that statement, saying that, in this day and age, it is hard to get 35,000 people to agree on something. And for 35,000 people to say, listen, this could really have serious implications by raising these NICOR rates is something. Al, any final words from you before we let you go?
First of all, thank you for the opportunity. This is a challenge for our members, and we are responding to our members to do the best job we can to let the Commerce Commission know what the implications will be to seniors in Illinois. They're significant, and they will be immediate after this final rate decision is made.
Yeah, it seems like just talking to you, this is serious, almost life or death, essentially, for some people, depending on how much their annual income is based off of Social Security and other means of income that they have coming in. Al Hollenbeck, thank you so much for your time today and really shedding a light on this issue on Chicago Live. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that is definitely one of those important issues that I'm sure we won't stop talking about. So we do appreciate Al coming on the show. We have much more coming up right here on Chicago Live. We are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Chicago Live. It is 1:18 on your Wednesday afternoon. I want to bring in Olivia Smith. She is a policy analyst with the Indiana Community Action Poverty Institute, also known as Indiana Community Action Association. And right now in Indiana, just so people are watching understand, the Indiana Family and Social Services Administration announced that Child Care and Development Fund voucher reimbursement rates will be cut anywhere from 10 to 35%, depending on the age of your child. Olivia, first of all, thank you so much for your time. And for anyone that is watching right now, explain to us this voucher program and really how it works.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today. So this program is a critical infrastructure that helps maintain our economy, helps parents work, and really make sure that our youngest Hoosiers have the best start to thrive. So the CCDF is a combination of federal and state funding that goes to subsidize childcare providers. So it doesn't go to parents, it goes to the providers to help pay for the cost of that early childhood education. So the reimbursement rate to the provider depends on various factors, including the age of the child, what level of pathway to quality they have. So you can have kind of a different combination depending on, the makeup of your specific childcare provider. But what we're seeing is with these pretty significant rate cuts to the folks who are looking after these kids, we're looking at a workforce that is already very much on the margins. So we're really worried about the ripple effects of this, not just for families that rely on the vouchers, but for all families with children in childcare, because as those, the income goes down for the providers, they have to find some way to make that up, or some are going to be forced to close their doors.
Yeah, they may have to cut staffing or close the business altogether. I do want people to know how much we're talking about in cuts. So for infants, it would be a 10% cut, toddlers 10%, preschoolers 15%, and this is really just like, wow. School age children, and that's kindergarten through 12, that is a 35% decrease. So that is a lot in terms of funding being cut. Let me ask you this, Olivia. When we talk about these cuts in child care access, specifically for low-income families and people that live in rural or even under-resourced areas, what will this look like if you are, a parent and maybe you don't have a lot of money and able to really afford this and you're looking for a provider? What could this potentially look like for you?
No, I think, really everyone involved or touched by the childcare ecosystem is about to face a lot of difficulties. For parents, as you said, absolutely, when you're talking about, providers now having to make do with less, in some cases, maybe that means passing costs on to those families, maybe raising rates for all of their participants, which could price other people out who maybe otherwise were able to stay in that childcare setting. I think another problem, I was speaking with someone from Northwest Indiana earlier today, and she was saying that 45 childcare providers across the state have already closed since this announcement was made in September, just because the margins are so thin for these businesses. So between, trying to retain workers, trying to keep small businesses open, as we see people lose that childcare, even if, they're currently working, that might have to change their employment status if they have to stay home and take care of their kids. So really, we see a lot of ripple effects. And it's interesting you mentioned the different percentages for the different age groups with the wait list that has been implemented as of December 2024. We actually won't even see any new infants or toddlers in the CCDF program for at least another year. That wait list is currently about 29,000. So even though, to your point, we're seeing those really higher rate cuts for the school age children, that makes up a pretty big portion of who is enrolled. But it also means that, while there might be fewer cuts to the younger infant populations, there are new infants who are going to be eligible anyway. So it's really a difficult time.
Yeah, it sounds like a ripple effect situation. And you mentioned 45. I think I heard you right that you said was it 45% have closed, or was that 4 to 5% have closed across Indiana?
As a quantity, 45 childcare providers across the state have already closed due to not being able to sustain on these new reimbursement rates.
And that's a lot of jobs. So do you
Absolutely.
So do you think overall the child care development in general will see a huge impact? Because that's a lot of people that won't have jobs.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that it compounds. One is that, many early childhood education workers themselves are eligible for the voucher program. So you have, the workers who are providing this care aren't able to keep their job, aren't able to keep their children in care. I think another big portion of this is that, I was looking, Early Learning Indiana has a great dashboard available by county to look at the impact of these new cuts across the state. And so I was looking for Lake County, and, right now we already have about 3 times as many CCDF eligible children than there are enrolled. So you already have a lot of kids who are eligible, families that are already eligible that are not getting these benefits. But then beyond that, when we're seeing, just based for Lake County, a 28% weekly revenue decrease for the child care providers in that county. So if you're an employer and you're suddenly asked to run your business with 28% less income than you're used to, especially when, that's typically been a consistent, reliable source of income, I think we're going to see a lot of different really tough shifts in the job market for both providers and for parents.
I was talking to a parent that actually qualifies for a voucher. This was a few weeks ago. She also lives in Northwest Indiana. And one of the things she told me was, obviously, I know this too as a parent, that in certain classrooms, depending on the age, you have to have so many staff there to accommodate, depending on how many children that are within that classroom. Daycare as well, obviously, because we're talking about daycares. And one thing that she said is that she has been on the wait list at this one particular daycare, several actually, because her child still is in place. She's been on a wait list for like 5 months. And I couldn't believe it. But Do you think that in some cases this will make it where the wait lists are even longer? Because if you have more of these facilities closing, there will be fewer around for parents to even go to.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's one way it compounds really quickly. When we're thinking about how these providers maintain, their services, when you're seeing a loss of 35% or more of your funding, depending on what children you're serving, that means that even families who aren't involved in CCDF, if your child just goes to a child care provider, that's about to become a lot more scarce. So either costs will have to go up to absorb some of that. Some providers may have to close or downsize, or to your point, for some of the more, expensive children where you have, the younger ones, you need to have a smaller ratio of children to carers, that might turn into a financial decision of we don't have enough staff or sufficient staff to even support that anymore. So even if places don't go out of business, I think we're likely to see reduced childcare capacity across the state. And that's just going to make life very difficult for parents who are already trying to find childcare. Like you said, a 5-month wait is unimaginable. But I think, what's kind of concerning is that already, before these cuts went into effect, the National Chamber of Commerce already estimates that Indiana loses about $4 billion a year in economic activity due to insufficient childcare across the state. So I imagine we will see that number grow and probably see a lot more direct impacts on families.
Oh, you're absolutely right. As a parent who has looked for childcare, no matter where you're looking, but specifically if you are looking in Northwest Indiana, very limited choices really to begin with. So this definitely does not have a positive impact. Now, walk me through this, Olivia. Someone watching right now, they may have heard us say cuts, but they're not really understanding where these cuts have come from. Can you walk us through how we arrived at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there have been a lot of big state government funding changes and swings over the past several years, especially with federal dollars coming in during COVID. One of the kind of programmatic expansions that we saw was of these child care subsidies. So these, again, are payments that go directly to the child care providers, the early education providers, to help parents be able to afford to have their kids in safe quality care so that they can go to work. And so we saw kind of coming out of the previous budget, which wrapped at the end of this fiscal year, we were seeing that these costs were continuing to go up, but the federal money that was used to expand it was one time and was not being accounted for very significantly in the state budget. So there was a hold harmless provision included that was intended to make sure that cuts wouldn't happen before they passed this most recent budget. But then in the September kind of release, they announced a $225 million budget shortfall for specifically this voucher program. So that is a combination of federal and state funds. So the specifically the money that they're worried about and trying to make up are those state general fund dollars, which are kind of the most flexible type of revenue that Indiana has. So that comes from collecting taxes, from collecting fees. So we have that as, kind of the one big pot of money. And so they, with the $225 million shortfall, the kind of framing we've seen from FSSA is that, cuts had to be made. Either it would be reducing number of children enrolled or cutting the provider reimbursement rates. However, as we've talked about, that's not really going to help children in the long run, because if the providers can't maintain their business, if they can't provide safe, quality childcare, then we're still going to have a significant issue for children's safety and parents being able to get to work. So part of that is, I think ultimately budgets are a set of decisions. So when we're talking about things like this, there are certainly ways that, funding can be moved, funding can be reallocated, but as it stands right now, it seemed that the decision was based more upon here's the level of funding that as a state we're willing to support in the future. So let's try to, right size it to that amount that we have decided.
Olivia, I know we've talked about the impact on parents, the child care providers, also staff. In your mind, and based on maybe even some statistical analysis here, it may be too soon for that part, how will this impact children?
It's really difficult. We know that parents especially face unique financial challenges in the first 1 or 2 years of the child's life between missed time off work for pregnancy, recovery from childbirth, postnatal visits, prenatal visits. You have all the additional costs. You have the loss of income from maybe not being at work. And so the combination of no new infants being able to be eligible for the vouchers, the combination of tightening voucher requirements. So we've also seen the income cap be reduced. So all of these things just mean fewer and fewer children at the end of the day are going to be able to get access to this high quality, safe childcare. And that also means a lot of parents are going to be pushed out of the workforce. People who want to work, people who need to make income are going to have to make really tough choices about the safety of their kids. And so I think early childhood education is very critical. When you have those trained providers who are there and able to offer, the quality care that kids need, you see much better outcomes. So, I will say I think the threshold for affordable childcare is about 7% of a family's income. And we already know that CCDF parents usually pay between, 9 to 15% of their income on childcare anyway. So, in a situation where childcare really isn't affordable for anyone, this is just going to make people make pretty impossible choices for the safety of their family.
No, that's a good point. I mentioned the woman that I was talking to. She's a part-time employee, doesn't have a lot of money to go around. And she told me she was paying $250 a week for her child to, have the opportunity to go to daycare. And then this voucher obviously assist with that amount. Let me ask you overall, looking at long picture here, what do you think the trickle-down effect is of these cuts? And do you think the cuts could potentially get deeper? Like we're talking 35% decrease for school-age children. Do you think it'll stay there, or those cuts could actually increase in the long run?
Ultimately, I think the funding, the state funding for CCDF, that's obviously in flux. As I think a lot of childcare providers are reaching out and telling their legislators, their lawmakers, how important this is. I think what we're probably going to see first in terms of impacts are going to be decreased enrollment. Like that, I think is number one. So if you have decreased enrollment, you're going to have a hard time maintaining your childcare staffing. If you have hard time maintaining the staffing, we're going to see that trickle down into less revenue, less tax revenue going, from those folks who are employed. So I do think that to the extent that the state can make funding this program a priority and give those parents the security and safety they need to be able to go work and provide for their families, the better off children will be. But I really think that, we're seeing this will show strains on local businesses whose employees maybe have to leave the workforce. We're going to see this on, tax revenues declining because you have fewer people working. And then also I've seen some research to say that that might lead to a future strain on K-12 education because they don't have a lot of children, especially like you said, from disadvantaged communities, rural communities, might not otherwise have an opportunity for that early childhood education, if not through the voucher program. And then of course, for folks who aren't on the vouchers, if, their local childcare provider can no longer pay the bills, their children won't be getting that early childhood education either. So we see a lot of short-term things that I think will start to be very apparent, and then the long-term ramifications are just rather disappointing when we think about opportunities lost for our youngest kids.
That was going to be my follow-up question to you. Thinking about early education, you hear that all the time. It's so important for your kids to get into school early. With this creating an extra barrier maybe for some parents, what do you think the issues could be if those children don't get the opportunity to go into these school settings earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the big things is that we'll probably see just kind of like long-term future strain on K-12 education. So, children that have had the opportunity to be in these, curriculum-driven young child educational programs, they're going to have a stronger start when it comes to schooling than children who didn't have that opportunity. Another thing we're kind of worried about is that, those early educators, that population tends to be a lot of women, especially a lot of women of color. And so, when we think about the economic impacts on the population of childcare workers, we're also seeing a really disproportionate hit to those groups as well. So I think, the combination of lack of the educational opportunity, but then also the additional financial strain that puts on parents, whether that means they're skipping meals so that they can pay for childcare, or they're choosing to heat or eat because utility bills are rising, rent is rising. So part of what's so concerning is that this is part of a host of rising costs that families are facing. And so, how individual families are going to respond is going to vary, but I know a lot of people are going to have to go without and make choices that are not going to serve them in the long run. So very, very sad to see.
Yeah, I see you getting emotional about it because it is. We were talking to AARP of Illinois right before you, talking about rate increases to their seniors for things like gas, things that are essential necessities, right? And so talking to them about, what that will look like for a senior who has a fixed income and really trying to sort it out. And parents are no different. In some cases, the parents that we're talking about that benefit from these programs have set incomes. It's no different. Where is that emotion coming from, Olivia? I saw you get a little emotional there talking about this. Are you too a parent? Do you see this firsthand in your job, how these decisions impact the everyday person?
Yeah, I'm not a parent. I'm somewhat new to the childcare space. So in our organization, Indiana Community Action Poverty Institute, we kind of broadly focus on any policy area that impacts the financial well-being of Hoosiers. So, obviously this is a piece that, as you said, will snowball, will compound. And so I wanted to pull up an email I got earlier this morning, again, speaking with the local president of the Indiana Association of Early Education, AEYC. She was talking about, what does this cut mean to her? Because I wanted to get kind of her firsthand reaction. And she said, imagine being told your salary is being cut in half next month. We're just trying to assess our, quote, cost of survival. And so, she said, we're responding to extinction level policies, and, the capacity is fluid, and they're just trying to hold their breath. And I feel like that was really powerful for me to read earlier, and just, as whether you're a business owner, whether you're a parent, I think one thing that has been really moving, and especially again, the early learning Indiana has some good resources of stories from providers that have been speaking out and talking about how, they've cared for children from the time they were infants all the way through school age, and they know the families and they have the relationships in the community, and that, it's a super critical part of a thriving, stable community. And that, beyond whatever short-term monetary impacts they're worried about facing, ultimately that they're just really, really distraught for the families because they know that there's so few options, so few affordable options. So I think for me, just kind of being able to, while I'm not directly in it, seeing the magnitude of what is happening and knowing that it will just get worse has been pretty sad, I gotta say. So I'm really happy that you're talking about it, and I'm really happy that I was able to give a little bit of insight into what's going on, because it's also a very nuanced problem that's under a lot of layers of budget decisions and all kinds of prioritization. So it's a difficult, messy problem. And yeah, I'm afraid it's just going to get worse before it gets better.
No, that's a good point, because if you're just thinking from a parent's perspective, or if you're not a parent, you budget, right? You plan for what is going to come out of your income, no matter if that income is big or small. And in this case, some of these decreases are so a lot. They're a lot. And so if you didn't have that in your budget to now make up for, your kid is already in some of these programs, and now you're trying to figure out how are you going to make up for that cost, because the school's cost, the daycare's cost, the childcare is still what it is. And that's a very tough decision, as you said, trying to figure out where you're going to cut from in your everyday life. Is it going to be at the grocery store, right? Is it going to be at the pharmacy, right? And these are real conversations that people are having every single day. There are some people out there, maybe they make enough money, they don't have to think about it. But for a lot of us, this is something that we have to think about every single day. And it's almost like a balancing act, right, Olivia?
Oh, absolutely. I think, especially young parents, when you think about not having programs in place like paid family and medical leave to support caregivers, whether that's for, your young children or aging parents. A lot of folks I know in the sandwich generation, are seeing pressures from both sides. And so, yeah, I think a lot of families just don't have sufficient resources, and this is going to be a tough blow in already difficult times.
And not to mention how AI and robots are taking us out in terms of being in the workforce as well. Olivia Smith, it has been a pleasure talking to you. What I really appreciate most is that even though you have MPA behind your name, at the end of the day, you're still human. And I think that is what matters when we're talking about these difficult conversations, still being emotional. Maybe you're not impacted directly, but you see the impact that it can have on someone else. And I think as long as we keep that kind of empathy, the world will be a better place. Olivia Smith, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. I appreciate you. Okay. So coming up, I was talking about those robots, and you guys are probably laughing a little bit as you were watching, but this is the real deal. It was leaked. An internal document from Amazon shows that they're avoiding hiring 600,000 plus U.S. workers by the year 2033. And it has everything to do with those darn robots. We're going to talk to John Challenger from Challenger Grand Christmas right after this break about this very issue. We'll see you on the other side of the break. Welcome back to Chicago Live. Okay, this is something that we've all been like, I knew it was coming. When we talked about AI, we've talked about robots. This is something that I think a lot of people have feared, and now here we are. So a leaked internal document reveals that Amazon plans to avoid hiring 600,000 U.S. workers by the year 2033 2033, replacing them with robotics that could save the company $12.6 billion over the next 3 years. So replacing us with robots. That's what we're talking about. We want to bring in John Challenger, the head of Challenger Gray and Christmas, to join us about this conversation. John, thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
You know, so people hear that. They hear 600,000 U.S. workers, they won't be hired because robots will take the jobs. This is something that I think a lot of Americans have feared would be an issue. How does this impact the workforce when we look at the human workforce versus the robots that are now a part of our everyday life?
Well, we are going to see more robots. The question still is open whether or not we'll see more jobs that use robots or that use AI, different kinds of jobs. Often technology does these big technological innovations like AI and robotic innovation. Often it does mean a lot of jobs are eliminated that those jobs can, those kinds of technologies can do, but it also means that new jobs get created because the economy is growing.
Okay, so I want to read something to people that are listening and maybe they're watching at the same time too, and kind of get your opinion on this and gauge, really where you're thinking with this, John. So it says here, Amazon has quietly deployed over 1 million robots across its global network, with humanoid workers now handling tasks from package sorting to inventory management. Your packages, so if you're already ordering from Amazon, they already pass through robotic hands more than human ones. Amazon's Hercules, Sequoia, and Proteus robots currently manage the repetitive, physically demanding work that built the company's logistics empire. Is this one of those situations where they still need humans now, but maybe long term, the goal here is that they won't need us much longer? And should we be concerned about that, if that is the case?
Well, again, I think that, it does mean that some jobs are going away. I mean, think of the most obvious. We can think of the self-driving vehicles, and already we're seeing Waymo deploy those vehicles in places like San Francisco and Phoenix. It is going to change things. It's going to change long-haul driving. So we can see that some of the jobs that exist today aren't going to be there in the future. But it doesn't mean that we're not going to see new jobs emerge that require not only new skills, but and this is a term that Amazon has been using, but require cobots. So those would be robots and AI that collaborate with humans. We're not going to get away from the need for human judgment or empathy or even physical dexterity that humans have that robots can't emulate.
So are you saying, John, if you work at a place like Amazon or maybe any other task, maybe eventually even in my job, I'll be looking over here and it will be a cobot with me? Is that something that you think we should kind of get used to understanding and maybe even learn more about in the workplace?
I think for everyone, they should be jumping into this AI world and learning how to use the technology. The people who are comfortable with it, who know how to use it to do their job better, it's perhaps, right, the greatest tool ever invented. Tools have helped people with the skills to use those tools, hold on to their jobs, do more, ensure their long-term viability. So it seems to me that AI, we have to look at it as not something that's going to take away our jobs, but something that's going to change the way we do our work.
John, let me ask you, in terms of changing the way that we do our work and looking at AI, what are some new jobs that maybe you've seen come online in the last few years that involve AI that maybe weren't there when you first started this company?
Well, think about everybody right now who is using AI. So I wouldn't say yet there are so many brand new jobs. We've heard about prompt engineers, people who are really capable of using AI, understanding how to make the best use of it. But just having people who are going to come in and train workers to use AI, look for ways inside their jobs to do them better, to do more. to take away repetitive tasks is really what it's going to be all about. No question that repetitive tasks, the jobs that require lots of that, probably are going to be impacted most heavily.
That's a good point, because I'm looking at something also on this paper. It says executives, this is with Amazon, reportedly plan to automate 75% of operations by the year 2033, directly eliminating altogether 160,000 warehouse roles by 2027. Those people that could potentially be out of jobs by that time, what could they be doing now to kind of prepare them for what this new workforce that I think we're all going to face here soon could look like?
Well, people need to look for ways to increase their education. They look for jobs and work that require emotional intelligence, customer service. I mean, there are so many jobs, in-person types of jobs that we're not going to see eliminated. Think about healthcare professionals, skilled trades workers, teachers and educators, people in the creative professions. Those are the types of jobs that, sure, AI is going to help them do their jobs better, just like using the computer, using search engines, help us, help all of us over the last 20 years do our jobs better.
Is this a situation, John, where you think in some cases, I think a lot of people don't think about it, but some people, they like to forever learn, right? They're the type of people that they're always learning more about whatever job that they're in. They're going back to maybe community college, taking a few courses. Do you think that is the situation that we're in now with AI and robots, is that we should all be looking for ways to maybe learn more, maybe go take a class at a community college to learn more about this?
Well, I do think that's important. In fact, you can take those classes online today, and can sit in your living room and work on upgrading your skills. But no question, education, which maybe we thought ended in another in the last era, when we finished high school or college, we just can't think of it that way anymore. The world's changing too quickly. There's too much new that's being developed that we have to stay abreast of. Otherwise, we're going to get outdated. So going to community college, taking classes, working, whatever your profession is, understanding the changes that are going on there, and taking classes to improve your skills is just going to pay off.
Yeah, and I think we are here. We're in the world of AI, so you got to get used to it. Or, you may be left behind is essentially what it sounds like to me. John Challenger with Challenger Grand Christmas, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking some time out and spending it with us.
Thank you.
All right, it was a pleasure. So we also want to mention that coming up a little later on our show, especially in the 2:00 hour, we're going to have a CEO of an AI company who's going to join us. I'm going to ask him some tough questions about these robots. We'll have that coming your way shortly. And then we're going to have much more on the show as well. We're going to talk to an aviation expert after this LA-bound flight made an emergency landing. That happened on Monday. We have a whole lot more. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Chicago Live. You look much taller than I do right now. I should have got my heels on. This is Paris Schutz, our political analyst, reporter, all things here at Fox 32. And I know you just finished having an in-depth conversation and interview with Congressman Brad Schneider all about this government shutdown.
Yeah, I mean, they're on 22 days now. It's the second longest government shutdown in history. And I asked him, are you negotiating? Is there anything going on in back rooms? He said no. I mean, they're not even in Congress. Republicans have been kept out. And obviously the issue is they want an up or down vote just on a temporary spending resolution, as they've been doing to fund the government on this kind of rolling basis. And Democrats have said, well, you need a handful of our votes in the Senate to avoid the filibuster. Remember, 60 votes to break a filibuster. And the Democrats say, well, we're not going to agree to anything that allows the Obamacare subsidies to expire, which would cause premiums to skyrocket. And those, the registration for Obamacare is going to go out in about a week. And so that's when people will feel it. So that's where the impasse is right now. And it's just a stare down.
Any idea from Congressman Schneider what this looks like for some of these workers that we've been talking about as this drags on?
Means they don't get a paycheck. You know, federal workers, many have been laid off, which there's questionable legality around that. The law is that you can't lay somebody off during a shutdown like this. And so judges are not receiving paychecks now. We'll see how long they can go. Air traffic controllers, but then also things like SNAP benefits. Those are going to run out. So those will have no money in about a week and a half or so. And we'll see if that causes people to get to action.
SNAP benefits going away. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people in desperate situations trying to survive.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, hundreds of thousands in Illinois alone that do rely on those SNAP benefits. So, I mean, there's a very real cost. I don't think that most Americans have felt it yet, but as this drags on, then they'll start to feel it. And, you have job losses. You might see the market start to react. And we'll see if that gets folks more urgent or acting with more urgency. But yeah, okay. So we're
Looking
down
at the market
358
now.
right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's reacting to the government shutdown. Eventually, it will. I mean, eventually, if the government can't conduct its very basic business, then markets are going to be pretty perturbed by that, and they haven't been so far. So that's. It just doesn't seem like there's any. And you do hear some Republicans saying, well, we do want to continue the health care subsidies, but let's do that separately. Let's not do that with this. And Democrats are like,
They want it all done now.
We don't trust you.
Yeah, they want it all done now. Let me ask you, so they're there in D.C. right now. They're not meeting at all? There's no meetings. They're just...
Something, Congressman Schneider gave me some stat that, like, over the last 100 so odd days, they've been in session, 19 of them. Full-time Congress people not in session. It's the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, not calling them into session. Now, there's some speculation that Johnson is keeping them out so they don't have to swear in the Arizona representative, the Democrat that won that special, Grijalva, that won that special election. She would be the deciding vote to force the release of the Epstein files. And Democrats are claiming, well, that's why you're keeping government out of session, because you're just afraid you don't want any forced vote on the Epstein files. So there's all kinds of layered dynamics here.
So does this sound like, and I don't want to, put words in your mouth, but does this sound like a political back and forth? And sadly, now the American people will be the people that will feel it the most.
Always. It's a political game of chicken.
Yeah.
The cars are just like this and vroom, vroom, vroom.
Right.
Who's going to blink? And the American people are the only ones that get lost in this. They're, Congress is still getting paid, and but troops, even ICE agents, they're not going to get paid unless there's some special loophole to find to pay them. So yeah, this is always the case, and I keep saying this. It goes back to the broader sense that they cannot pass a yearly budget. The city has to do it. The state has to do it. They do it every year after intense debate. We see the city, they're going to start debating. And it'll be intense, but at the end of the day, they have to pass a year's budget. Congress has stopped doing that. They just stopped doing it because they spend so much more money than they take in, and no matter whatever cuts you hear, Doge or whatever,
right,
the spending just goes up, the debt just goes up, and so they just fund government on this continuing month-by-month basis as the debt keeps spiraling up, and then we get these games of chicken where they can't even do this.
Well, since you brought up Doge, I want to go there. When we talk about Doge, that was supposed to actually help the government, right? It was pegged that way to help the government.
That way, and it didn't do any. It didn't. At the end of the day, the stuff it cut were just nibbling around the edges, and a lot of that stuff had to be restored,
right,
thanks to some federal rulings. And so, when you look at the big drivers of costs, it's entitlements and it's defense and debt on the interest on the debt. And so once, if Congress wanted to get serious, if the president wanted to get serious, they would look at the defense budget and they would say, all right, well, this is like $1 trillion budget and we need to make some big chops here. But they've never done that. And entitlements too, it's the third rail.
Right.
No one wants their entitlements touched, but it takes up a massive chunk of the budget. And so when we talk about we're going to cut the Department of Education, we're going to cut USAID, it's a fraction of a percent. And so every single year, debt just keeps, we're near $40 trillion now of debt?
Yeah.
Not a single soul has presented a realistic, maybe one or two folks, but neither party has gotten behind any kind of realistic way to get the debt under control. Nobody has, and especially not the president. It's not even on his radar. So we're just going to keep having these continuing resolutions.
Yet there's a ballroom that's being...
And he's building a ballroom he says is not going to be funded by taxpayer money, but we don't know. And then he also said that he thinks the Department of Justice should just pay him $230-something million. Now he said that would be given to charity. What's the justification? I don't know. He might think it was lawfare, but these were legally justified investigations, and we've covered Ed Burke and Mike Madigan. This would appear on the surface, given what the reporting is said to be about as brazen a pay-for-play ask or a bribery or shakedown that we've ever seen in government. If that's literally what he's asking for, which he confirmed today at a press conference in the Oval Office, that he thinks the Justice Department owes him money. For what legal standard? I have no idea. As you look at some of the destruction, and he also said that the East Wing of the White House wasn't going to be touched. This was not going to, but clearly that wasn't true because the facade here of the East Wing is being torn apart to make way for this ballroom. And again, this is another thing about Congress not being in Washington. They can't really vote to stop it or do any oversight on it, even though it's very legally dubious whether the president's just allowed to do this. I think we're just kind of in uncharted territory.
And a lot of, I know historians have questioned, tearing that apart and really what it means for the structure of the White House overall, and really tearing apart history at the same time. So very interesting. Yeah,
and a lot of supporters bring up the fact that a lot of presidents have refurbished or rehabbed, the White House, and Obama built a basketball court. I think there might have been a bowling alley at one point. But this is a massive.
This is different.
This is different. This is a massive. I mean, this is a national monument. This is a public monument, and that's where the law might be not on the president's side here. This is not the president's house. This is the people's house. It's the public's house. It's a federal monument, and so. It wouldn't seem that the law is on the side of not getting some kind of congressional approval to build on a federal monument.
Yet it's happening, and we're watching
it. It's happening, and I think that's just kind of an exertion of authority. I mean, the president's basically like, well, Congress isn't here, and I'm just going to get the demolition equipment and just get started. And I don't know if someone's going to sue to get a TRO like they've done with the National Guard here. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that are kind of, that we've really never faced in terms of legal questions. So, but again, he said that public money will not be paying for that, but we're not really sure what will be paying for that or how it'll be paid for. But we just know that right now they don't have paychecks going out to federal workers.
And that's why you have the Chicago report, because there's so many different issues. Here,
it's hard to keep track of everwe'll We got a city budget
city,
too.
State, federal, everything.
State's back in session next week, and so we'll try to keep on it all for you.
All right, we'll make sure you get that caffeine drip because you're going to need it, Paris.
Not afternoon, you know?
Yeah, I
Keeps
know.
me up at night.
All right, Paris Schutz,
you.
it's always a pleasure. Thank you
You as
so
well.
much
All right,
for
got
breaking
it.
all of that down. Stay with us. We're going to talk to Hank Krakowski, an aviation expert, coming up after this break. This is all about that flight bound for LA that had to make an emergency landing. We'll have it on the other side. Welcome back to Chicago Live. We do have some breaking news that we want to alert you to. This is a live look from Sky Fox over the scene. This is I-30, or I should say I-355 northbound near 127th Street in Lamont. All of this happening right at around 1:08 this afternoon. This is the Illinois State Police. They're doing a preliminary investigation following what they say is an alleged expressway shooting near this area. No injuries are being reported. I-355 northbound traffic is being diverted off at 127th Street. Again, this is an ongoing investigation. As of right now, no injuries are being reported. Of course, we will keep you updated as soon as we learn more. Well, this situation that we're about to talk about now raised a lot of eyebrows. A Los Angeles-bound flight had to make an emergency landing. This happened Monday after its pilots lost a radio link with flight staff, and it prompted them to have to bang on the locked cockpit door and raising fears that someone was trying to break in. We want to bring in Hank Krakowski, an aviation expert, CEO and owner of the Conor Aviation Group, LLC. Thank you so much for your time today.
Good to be with you.
Let's talk about this. When I say that the pilots lost a radio link with flight staff, explain to those who are watching right now exactly what that means.
Okay, so when you're sitting in an airplane, I'm sure you've seen flight attendants pick up a telephone or a handset near their workstations, and they're typically communicating with the pilot or the flight attendants on the other side of the airplane. That's a common, really important communication device within the aircraft. So the pilots need to be able to talk to the flight attendants at various times on any given flight and that's the system they use. So you think of it kind of like an intercom within an office.
So this flight took off from Omaha, Nebraska. Within 36 minutes, it was back at the airfield where it left from. Talk about the breakdown. What is the communication breakdown in this situation?
Well, my understanding from everything I've read, and it's all mostly, in the public, but it seems consistent. So the pilots were unable to talk with the flight attendants. There seemed to be a problem with the interphone system itself. So now you've got a situation where the pilots cannot communicate with the flight attendants in the back of the airplane, and somebody's banging on the door. Now, that door is pretty heavy. You can't really hear anything through it. So they had no idea what was going on. This was shortly after takeoff. So you've got a situation where they couldn't even talk to the flight attendants because of this problem to ascertain what was going on in the cabin of the airplane. And somebody's banging on the door with, and you would make the assumption they're trying to get into the airplane. So I think the captain made a very wise move to just stop where they're at, land the airplane, and ascertain what's going on, and not try to handle it in the airborne situation.
Hank, when I think about, not being able to have conversation with, the pilot, you can't talk back to the flight attendant. You don't know if turbulence is coming up. You don't know if someone is sick in the cabin, for example. Is there a backup system on a plane in case something like this happens? Or is this the only option is for that pilot to then turn around?
Well, it's the primary option. Every airline has their own procedures if that system goes down. I'll be honest with you, this is the first time in 40 years of airline flying I've ever heard of a situation like this. I've read that maybe somebody left a switch on or left the communication line open. So the key issue is, as you said, it's important. If you're coming up in an area of turbulence, you need to talk to the flight attendants to secure the cabin and the galleys before you hit the turbulence. So it's really an important safety device. Keep in mind, this airplane had 3.5 hours of flying left. So you don't want to proceed on a flight that long with that inability to actually talk to your flight attendants.
I'm reading this. It says doors on passenger jets, which you hinted at, are normally locked during flights and were reinforced according to FAA rules that was introduced after 9/11. However, most commercial planes also have a touchpad through which the flight crew can request access. Can you talk to us about what that touchpad does and what it actually is?
Yeah, so it's kind of like the touchpad to open up your garage door when you're outside, and every airplane's different. I'm not familiar with this particular airplane type, but the Boeing airplanes, which I'm familiar with, that's a standard procedure. But there is also a communication that typically happens along with the use of the touchpad. So anyway, it was a breakdown shortly after takeoff, a lot going on, a lot of uncertainty as to what was going on. The captain made a very good decision.
Is there ever a situation outside of this where, I know in this particular case, this radio link was lost, but is there ever a situation on a plane where in some cases the pilot can't talk to the crew, the cabin crew specifically?
Well, normally not. I mean, you could use, the pilot can also get on the public address system as he talks to the passengers, and that's an alternate form of communicating with the flight attendants. But that gets broadcast across the whole aircraft, so that's not something you would normally use.
Let's talk about, overall, Hank, it seems like we're talking about, I don't know if it's because of social media, but it seems like we're talking about cases involving airplanes more frequently, especially making headlines. What do you make of that? Is it because of social media? Is it that so much is going wrong that we're learning about? I think there's probably more going wrong than we know in some cases, but do you think that is the reason why aviation in general is making headlines so much?
Yeah, I believe fully it's social media and the amount of blogging that's going on. There's websites out there that try to capture everything that's happening that gets posted online. So yeah, I think that really accentuates it. I can tell you, at my former airline, I actually ran the operations control center. Things went on every single day. So the amount of things going on in the system right now does not feel unusually high compared to what I experienced 20 years ago.
So you think the rise of social media has made it seem like it's worse than it actually is right now?
Well, I do. And, there are more flights and there are more people flying than ever before. So that also amps up the possibility of more incidents, so to speak.
Got it. Any other expertise or anything else you'd like to add, Hank?
Well, no, other than I think it is important for the government shutdown to end quickly so our air traffic controllers can be properly compensated and they can take their mind off of that and keep it where it needs to be, keeping the sky safe.
Yeah, because that is such, I know someone that does that job. That is such a grueling job to begin with. And then to now have it over your head if when and how you're going to be paid, especially if you have bills, you're an adult, that is a lot on your brain at the same time, keeping your eyes on the airspace at all times when you're on the job. Can you talk about the importance of the air traffic controller? Maybe some people don't really get it.
Well, it's an absolute critical job. And I actually was head of air traffic control in the United States for about 4 years. It is a grueling job. It is absolutely intense. You stay focused all the time you're on duty, and you can't lose that focus. So when you get done with a day shift being an air traffic controller, you've worked hard.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've heard from the person that I know that does that for a living. Hank Krakowski, you have been an absolute pleasure to talk with, very knowledgeable. We thank you so much for coming on the show, and hopefully we'll have you on again. Maybe the next time, something positive we'll be talking about, although this did have a positive outcome.
It did.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
All right, well, stay with us here on Chicago Live. We have 40 plus more minutes of news that we're going to bring you right here on the show. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Chicago Live. It is 2:20 on this hump day. I kind of had a little moment there where I was talking about Amazon planning to avoid hiring 600,000 U.S. workers by the year 2033. I was upset about it. I want to bring in Darren Kimura, who is the CEO and president of AI Squared. He first began his career as a founder, and he's president and CEO and building and exiting 2 technology companies. He's done a lot in his career. Darren, we want to thank you so much for your time and coming on with us today.
Oh, Tia, it's my absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I was talking to someone else about this. It got me a little fired up when I saw how many U.S. workers may not have employment because of these robots. When it comes to the manufacturing sector and warehousing and deskless roles, that's a hard one to say. Should we be concerned as humans that these robots are going to take all of these jobs? Is this a concern that we should have?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I would say yes, it's a concern, but I think there's a lot of details that go under some of the statistics and the headlines. So, for example, let's kind of start with the Amazon 600,000 jobs report. So, if you kind of read into that, what they're talking about is Amazon has, based upon its current growth, the expectation to double its sales in the next 10 years. And based upon the amount of people that they have working in these factories today, they have an estimated amount of jobs that it would effectively have. Now, they're also deploying more and more robots, more and more artificial intelligence and additional technologies. And in doing so, they're able to reduce, a percentage of those jobs. So that 600,000 job number is actually not jobs that will be fired from the current Amazon workforce. It's actually jobs that will not need to be hired in the future. That's one thing to think about there. And I guess one more thing I guess I would mention there is also when those jobs are not hired in those areas where the robots are doing the work, there are other jobs that are being created. And that's what we've seen over time and what also I expect to happen here when this gets fully deployed.
Darren, we hear a lot from people in the AI space saying, hey, don't be scared of AI, learn AI, make sure that you're equipped for the changes that will happen within the workforce. I see something here you have in your write-up, you have upskill. Talk about upskilling and really what that means and what workers right now can do to prepare for this new wave of technology.
So first of all, I 100% believe that this is an opportunity for every single one of us to get a little bit smarter, a little bit more knowledgeable. I, for example, have chosen to go back to school and do a PhD in artificial intelligence because I recognize that this is a new field. It's based upon technologies and techniques that we had before, but not one that I was really that comfortable in. And I wanted to learn a lot more about it. So even I chose to go back and become upskilled. And that could mean a variety of different things. So in the case of robots, for example, which, Amazon already has over 1 million robots in their factories, that could be things like understanding on how to repair robots or how to program robots or how to make sure that they're operating efficiently, how to manage some of these AI technologies, these workflows, as we call them, all the way down to how do we build AI? Humans can bring in a variety of different elements that are not inherent upon AI today. For example, safety, security, ethics. And I think this is also inherently human. So this is something we have within us. Understanding how the technology works allows us to then bring our knowledge and our abilities to make sure that the technologies of tomorrow are going to be safer and better.
I like what you said there, even about your learning curve and how you went and learned this. Where do people start? Where do you suggest people that are in the workforce right now, maybe all they know is ChatGPT, right? Maybe that's as far as their knowledge goes. Where do you think they can go to learn more? Are we talking about a community college course? Where can you go to learn more about AI?
I think people will want to learn it in different ways. So learn it in the most effective way for you. It could even be as basic as watching TikTok shorts on AI and what is AI and how to code AI and what are agents and those as basic as that, or watching YouTube tutorials and how-tos on that. Start there. That's easy to consume. You're already doing it. Maybe just shift some of your time from whatever the latest fad is into learning. I think it can start as basic as that and work its way all the way up to things like you mentioned, community college, for example. It could be virtual learning. There's probably no shortage of 10 or 12 courses I've taken online for free on Coursera that are available to anyone and everyone, offered by Stanford and MIT, just by you registering and spending a little bit of your time to do that. So you could kind of take it there all the way up to things like what I'm doing, going and finding a university that is curating content in the way that you want to learn and really investing in that. So there's so many ways to learn. Finding a mentor. Large companies, Amazon is a good example. They actually have apprenticeship programs in robot training. So different organizations are also offering these kinds of upskilling opportunities for workers.
I love to hear that, because sometimes people feel like, I don't even know where to start. I feel left out. I'm not on this train. Let's talk about some of the positions in which you can work alongside AI and not fully be replaced as a human.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the positions that will definitely be replaced are going to be those kind of frontline roles where if you ever had to return something to Amazon, and you engage with a chatbot, or maybe even pick up a call and go through a auto attendant phone interaction, like those roles, I think will definitely be replaced. Now, what happens as those are being replaced is that you need human supervisors. So, working alongside some of these technologies and supervising them, or coming up even with guardrails for them, that's where humans can directly oversee the deployment of these technologies today. As AI and robots become more prolific and get rolled out, it won't happen fast. I think that the deployments will take time. They typically start by small little pilots being deployed in small factories. And over the course of many months, perhaps even years, the software and the processes get tuned in. But all of that tuning, all of that observation, that recording, that feedback is human. So you as a worker can directly engage in that process. But then even going fast forward more into the future, the 2033 type future, every one of these agentic systems is what we call them. These artificial intelligence systems are going to require human supervision. But in order for you to do that, you have to understand what these technologies are. So if you want those jobs, it's really important to understand how AI works and why it does things. And you can do that learning today, so you can prepare yourself for that management level of the future.
Darren, I want to get your perspective on this. AI for a lot of us is still relatively new, right? We're still learning a lot about it, although it has existed for a little while now, and maybe it hadn't really trickled down into what we felt like was our everyday lives. But I want to ask you this, looking 5 years from now, we're talking 2030, looking 10 years from now, where do you see AI in our everyday lives in terms of in the workforce?
Yeah, that's a really tough question to answer, because if you just think back three years ago, ChatGPT wasn't even something most of us knew about. The company had existed, but we weren't really using it at that point yet. And look how far we've come in such a short period of time. If I were to just kind of put my best guess out there, I would say in 5 years, humans are working, to your earlier point, in parallel with AI and robots. We're working to supervise them. We're working on new ways to deploy them, but we're very engaged in the way that they work. I think in 10 years, we're probably going to see a scenario where you're going to have a fairly large deployment of most of these manual, repetitive tasks taken on by robots that have AI built into them. We call that physical AI. And then humans, in that sense, are now working on those robots, making them more efficient, more cost-effective, building software for them, still developing the algorithms, figuring out what they should do. But these systems are now becoming smarter. They're beginning to learn and being able to predict a little bit more effectively about the future. And I think that will continue to happen as time goes on.
Darren, I've never had the opportunity to ask someone this, but in terms of jobs in AI, you mentioned some of those humans that are repairing AI or working on the robots, et cetera. Some people obviously on the software side of things. When it comes to those jobs, how much are we talking in terms of pay for some of these positions, maybe that people never thought about?
Well, pay probably has a lot of factors beyond the dollar per hour. It could also be related to, for example, where they are, level of involvement, education behind it. But I have seen, for example, situations where robot mechanics could get paid anywhere from $35 to $75 an hour. I've seen software programmers on a contract basis get paid, upwards of probably $300 an hour, maybe even more. And again, it depends on what level of the process, the logic that you're working at. So, sky's the limit. I mean, even if you just look at some of the more recent headlines, you're now seeing, astronomical packages going to technologists working for some of the largest companies in the world, like Meta, for example. So, it's fairly robust, I would say, salary wise right now.
When it comes to really where these jobs are, because you did mention that, when I think of technology and where we've seen the jobs mostly in the past, a lot of those jobs have been out on the West Coast. Is that still the case?
I think from a software development and an artificial intelligence in the what we call the LLMs, like what ChatGPT is, you do see a lot of those roles currently on the West Coast, probably even more concentrated in Silicon Valley. But the factories are not there. The factories are everywhere. And the deployment of the technology, that's also everywhere. When it comes to robotics, I mean, robotics, frankly, is global. Japan is the leading manufacturer of robotics in the world. So this is a global phenomenon. And those developers, those people that are doing the coding, the people that are working on the sensors, they're everywhere too. They have to be where the factories are. So it's not in that sense just concentrated to the Silicon Valley area, but more of a global thing.
All right. Well, Darren Kimura, we appreciate you being with us. You've definitely given all of our listeners and viewers some insight on AI. Maybe some people are now thinking, hey, I got a new job career field that I'm going to enter as well. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure speaking with you.
My pleasure. Take care.
All right. You do the same. Well, stay with us right here on Chicago Live. I know you've heard of, speaking of humans being replaced or robots replacing humans, this is kind of on the flip side. So you've seen some of those like dummies, right, that are used for CPR. Well, guess what? Humans are now replacing them. And we're going to talk to one of them about CPR training. And now it's literally mouth to mouth, right? Two humans together in this training process. We'll have that right after this break. Welcome back to Chicago Live. I kind of just hinted at this before the break. Humans are replacing dummies in medical training, and we want to bring in Bob Kaiser, the interim executive director for Simulation and Integrative Learning Institute at UIC College of Medicine. Bob, thank you so much for your time, and I'm really looking forward to talking about this. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, we're glad to be here, Tia. Thank you.
So let's talk about this. So 160 actors were used in these simulation exercises, and really it's supposed to help UIC, College of Nursing and College of Medicine, those students really get that one-on-one real interaction. Tell us how it works.
Yeah, so great question. So the doctors that all of our viewers go to see, they need a place to practice these things before they are with patients. So that's where we come in. So our simulation centers at UIC will provide opportunities for our students to take what they learn in the classroom, their theories, and then to practice them in our sim labs, where theory becomes experience.
So talk to me, 160 actors have been used. Who are these actors, and really what do they do during these exercises? Because the reason why I ask that is because we've seen, for example, when people are learning CPR, right, they're doing it on a dummy. They're not doing it on an actual person in most of these class environments where people are learning. What kind of exercises are they going through?
Right, so just to clarify, none of our actors are being used during CPR. None of our actors are hurt doing simulations. But what a great question, what do they do? So our actors, they portray patients, they portray family members, they portray other healthcare colleagues, and they provide opportunities for our learners to practice communication, like doing basic history-taking skills, all the way up to having those difficult conversations, like how to provide bad news to a patient. Our actors also provide coachings on our physical exam maneuvers and helping the students learn those maneuvers, and also how to find maybe those positive findings.
Why do you think that's so important? I have been on the other end of speaking to a doctor about a family member that had some really bad news. And in that moment, I felt like, wow, this doctor really needs, I'm gonna be honest with you, I felt like the doctor really needed some training on empathy. They knew the medical stuff. They had that down to a science, right? But when it came to being empathetic, dealing with a family that is like shocked by this news that you've now unloaded on them, I felt like the doctor didn't understand that part. Do you think that's why it's important to have the actors there? Because you can be told, hey, you could have said that a little differently. It would have had a different reaction.
I think you're correct, Tia. That's exactly why. So I think what we do here is we combine the clinical confidence and then add in the emotional intelligence. It's hard for anybody to have those conversations, and some of our healthcare providers have those conversations sometimes daily, sometimes hourly in their line of work. And so what we do is we give these learners a safe place to practice these tough conversations, to find the words, but also to find their authentic voice in doing this. And in this entire process, especially working with the actors and our faculty, they hopefully find their authentic voice when giving this information and make that human-to-human connection.
Where do you find the actors? If someone's watching right now and they're like, man, I would have loved to be a part of this, where do you find those actors?
Yeah, so the actors that we use are professional actors in the Chicagoland area. Many of them do theater. They're in your local plays, your musicals, etc. They're also in movies, TVs, etc. So we hold auditions for our actors, and what we're looking for are those people who can produce complex portrayals, obviously, but are also observant, because these actors have the double duty of portraying the patient, but they also are assessing the students. They are keeping in their mind what the student has done during the encounters, such as, did they ask me about my cough? Did they provide counseling on this or that topic? And on top of all of this, all of our actors have to be able to provide feedback to the learners on how it felt to be their patient, and to provide non-judgmental feedback, that those observations, so that the student can take what they've learned in the room with the patient and then apply it on the floors of the clinics and hospitals.
Bob, is this a one-time simulation experience, or is this something that goes on throughout the course of a student's year?
It is embedded through the entire medical curriculum. It is the learners come to us first 2 weeks of medical school. They're in our sim center practicing these conversations, practicing this history taking, all the way up through their M4 year, which is the year that they graduate. And then we even see them when they are residents and even practicing physicians. Simulation has proven that can be used at any level of learning, even those who are already practicing.
Let me ask you this, Bob, because I think about, like, for example, myself, I grew up in the inner city mostly all my life as a child, ended up going to Ohio, which was completely different from what I was used to, went to Ohio State. And that was, where I grew up was really my only real, I would say, outlook on life at the time, right? Because a lot of times that has everything to do with how you develop as a person. Do you find that doing this, it actually opens people up, it crosses culture, it crosses age, it crosses, maybe you're someone like me where you grew up and what you mostly saw. This helps to kind of open your eyes and a reason why I ask that question is because when you're in medical school, you're grinding, right? You're learning, you're not thinking about maybe, how this conversation will land, because most of your ability and time has been learning so much of this medical information.
Yes to everything you just said. I think simulation has the opportunity to provide the place where even tougher conversations can take place. I think to your point, we can introduce different types of patient experiences and a safe place where the students and the patients are safe because they're actors. But also we can have conversations, and we debrief every simulation. So if we do a simulation with, say, a different culture or a person that's not like the students, we have the opportunity to talk about even the biases that came up for them and how to deal with those biases and how to form that connection with their patients. I think everybody involved in simulation, the learners, the actors, even us simulationists, we learn a little bit more about ourselves each time a simulation happens, because we're forced to examine why did we make the choices that we made and how can we do better. That's what simulation is all about. And how can we make sure that the patients that we serve, the communities that we serve, the world that we serve can be a better place for the work that we do.
Well, that's a good point that you bring up, because I think about, when I had a child, one of the things I would always hear is, especially being a Black mom, a Black pregnant mom, is that you would often hear why the mortality rate was so high in our community. Oftentimes you would hear, well, doctors didn't listen to me. And in some cases, some of those doctors may have never experience talking to someone like me. And I think this kind of breaks down some of those barriers that maybe we don't even know we have within ourselves.
Right? First of all, I'm sorry for that experience. That's, I think I can relate to it in my own way. But to your point, I think that our job as simulationists is to provide a place for exploration. It's a place for curiosity. We suggest that students don't try to do their best, don't try to get an A+ in simulation. Try those things that you are curious about. Try those things that you would never maybe try with a patient, just to see what they're like and to see if there's something that we can glean out of those to then, they can then incorporate into their authentic clinical self. To provide them opportunities to talk with people that maybe they may not see ever again in clinical practice, but to make sure that they've had that practice. And also the last thing is to be able to listen to the patients to what you just said. It's really important, especially in the way that UIC looks at medical education. It is a partnership between patients and healthcare providers. Healthcare providers have to be able to hear the patients and to understand them and to have empathy for them and connect with them as a patient, as a human. So then they can collaborate to make sure that the patients are receiving the best healthcare possible.
I love what you said there. Bob, I know we're talking about this now, but is this new to the curriculum, or has this always existed in this way?
It's relatively new, Tia. It depends on your reference for new. So human simulation started at UIC around 1987. And human simulation started a little bit before that, but we were one of the first human-based simulation centers in the country. And so it's been around for a while. We also have technology-based simulation, which is the mannequins, the CPR mannequins, et cetera. And that started a little bit later for us in the 2000s. But it's definitely, when it first started, it was novel. People were like, actors can really teach medical students. And now it's everywhere. It has been, though not currently, but has been part of the licensing exams for medical students, because the powers that be knew how important it was for communication to be a part of the medical training. So now it's everywhere in all medical schools, which I'm very grateful for as a simulationist, but also as a patient, and also because my family members are patients. I feel that healthcare is safer because of simulation.
So as a simulationist, what is your job? What exactly do you do?
I love that question. Woo, what a good question. So what do I do? So I do three things. So the first thing is that I take the curriculum, the theory, the educational points that the curriculum our faculty are making, and help them produce experiential learning for our students, so that they can experience those patients, those conversations that they've read about. To your point, they do so much studying in the classrooms. So my job then is to take them into the safe place of our clinical lab and to allow them to experiment with these things. The second thing is that we train fellow simulationists, our actors, our technicians, et cetera, on how to produce these simulations. And the third thing then is that we take their students through these simulations, the learners. We're with them, during the day of the simulations. We help them process what they've gone through in the form of debriefs, et cetera. So I would say that's a good summary of what we do.
Bob Kaiser, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for breaking all of that down for us. It's a new role that I didn't even know, existed, but it makes absolute sense of why it should. So thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Thank you, Tia.
All right, stay with us right here on Chicago Live. We are going to be talking to John Kirby. I'm sure you know that name. A very lengthy career in terms of the political space, a retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral as well. We're going to have him right after this break. Welcome back to Chicago Live. It is 2:50 on your Wednesday afternoon. I want to bring in our esteemed guest. This is John Kirby. And John Kirby, you know that name because he definitely was at the microphone over the years as the senior spokesman for the Pentagon, State Department, and of course the White House. He's also a retired Rear Admiral in the U.S. Navy and now has been appointed director of the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics. That is effective November 15th. Mr. Kirby, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't tell you how excited I am.
So listen, you have had really the tough job of speaking at the podium. I've seen you over the years speaking at the podium about some really tough issues that have involved all of us here in America. Let's talk about this new job that you're doing and what makes it different from other jobs that you've had in the past.
I think it's the most unique opportunity I've ever been given in my professional life, and I'm just so thrilled about it. Can't wait to get started. Mostly, I just can't wait to be around students. I did a little teaching at Georgetown a few years ago, and I loved every minute of that, just being on campus and being around students. They're so bright. They're so energetic. They have such incredible futures ahead of them. And just the mere thought that I can be a part of all that, maybe helping folks find ways to serve in the public sector or even just become better citizens is a real thrill, particularly now with the country so divided as it is. So mostly I'm just thrilled to get back on campus. The second thing is the University of Chicago is a real crown jewel. I mean, I never lived in the Midwest. I never lived in Chicago, but I knew well, even growing up, how special this place was in terms of its advocacy of free expression and free speech and intellectual rigor. So again, all of that just makes me so excited.
So I know you're from Florida. You have two grown children with your wife, Donna. One thing I can tell you as a Chicagoan through and through, you need to go get you a down coat before you get here. So make sure you invest in that. Get you a hat and some gloves and probably some heated pads to go in those shoes as well. In terms of coming to Chicago, have you decided on, the place to live? What do you like about Chicago? Is there a favorite restaurant that you have?
I won't go so far as the restaurant thing, but my wife and I, we were just in Chicago the last 2 days, and we picked up the keys to an apartment. It's right there on Michigan Avenue with a terrific view of the lake and the parks. We want it to be close. We want it to be, it's in the Loop, and we want it to be there in downtown Chicago. Well, one of the things I really am looking forward to about this job is just experiencing all that is Chicago. It is an incredibly beautiful city. I had no real experience with it until I got into the application process for this job. And of course, that required me to come out there for a few visits. And every time I went out there, my wife and I, we were just so thrilled about the prospect of living there. There's so much culture, so much great architecture, so much history. And the park system is just second to none. I've never seen anything like it. You don't even feel, I'm telling you, like you need to hear.
It's okay. I'm listening.
You don't even feel sometimes like you're in a big city, if that makes any sense.
It does.
So the trees, the parks, the running paths, the fountains. I mean, it's almost like you're in nature as well as being in the city. It's just incredible.
I can hear your excitement and I see it in your face as well. That is true about Chicago. For a lot of us that have been here for a good portion of our lives, grew up here, it feels almost like a town feel. Since you are going to be on Michigan Avenue, that's pretty much where our studio is located off of Michigan and Lake. You got to stop by here and come see us. But in the meantime, I want to ask you about this. You said something that I thought was very profound when you first started talking, and you talked about the division in this country. Some of us feel like we've never seen anything like this before. What do you feel like in terms of your experience? Because you've seen a lot in your time in service. What do you feel like your experience will bring to the generation that you will have the opportunity to touch that maybe they haven't experienced or seen before?
I hope I can bring a little bit of my own practice and experience in national security specifically. I won't claim to be, an expert on all realms of political behavior and conduct in this country, far from it. But I do think I have a good, strong rooting in national security and how national security and politics intersect, because they do. So I'm looking forward to sort of maybe bringing that to the program. Although the Institute of Politics program is just incredible in terms of how wide-ranging it is and how inclusive it is. So I do hope, though, that maybe we can talk a little bit more about national security.
Here's a question for you. Is it more difficult to go and face the press when some of these crazy things are happening across our world, or is it tougher to walk into a room full of college students?
I'm going to guess the latter than the former, because I know just from my brief experience, I've had some exposure to the IOP and some of the students, but not a whole lot. But just in my brief experience with them, they are incredibly smart, talented, energetic. They're thoughtful. They're more engaged than I know I was when I was in college. And so, yeah, I'm a little. That's a little intimidating, but it's also really exciting for me. And I know, I know I can say this for a fact. I will be inspired by them. I will be informed by them. I will be educated by them much more than I fear I can give them in return.
I know you worked with the Obama administration, obviously Chicago, home to Barack and Michelle Obama. I don't know if you guys still talk, but have you had any conversations or any talks with maybe anyone from the Obama administration about the city of Chicago and you coming here?
Well, certainly Mr. Axelrod, as you know, he founded the Institute of Politics, and he was right at President Obama's side. And he has just been, as he has even before this job became an option for me, he's just been a great mentor and a friend, and certainly since then he has been right by my side and in helping me navigate the process and getting prepared for this job. He's been just great. I don't know the Obamas personally, although I've had the privilege and the honor of meeting both of them on one occasion. But I'm very excited to just be a part of Chicago. Chicago just, there's a muscularity in all the good sense of that word. I mean, a bigness, a strongness, an effervescence about the city that has already infected my wife and I, and we're just so excited to get out there.
The city of big shoulders. Okay, we're going to play a little game. I know you weren't prepared for this, and neither were I, but I just got prepared for it. Okay, so deep dish pizza or thin crust? I got to ask.
I gotta go with thin crust only because, and I know I may get flack for this, I've never had a real Chicago deep dish pizza, so I have nothing to compare it to.
It's a restaurant right here, Giordano's. I'm looking at it right off Michigan and Lake. You got to get there. Okay, lakefront.
Giordano's, got it.
Lakefront in the summertime, because I'm guessing you visited sometime in the summer, or do you think downtown at Christmas time? I know you haven't been here for Christmas yet, but if you had to pick. I've heard
Christmas time is just spectacular in Chicago, and I can't wait to see what the city does for the holidays. I got to go with the Lakeshore summertime. When I started my interview process, it was sort of early September, so I got to go out there when the weather was sparkling and bright and shiny. And I'm a Florida boy, so I love beaches. I love the water, so I'm going to have to lean towards Lakeshore in the summer.
Okay, that's fair. Cubs at Wrigley or Sox at guaranteed rate?
That is not a fair question.
Yes, it is. It's fair.
I grew up in Tampa Bay, so I'm a Tampa Bay Rays fan and a Bucks fan. I haven't made a decision yet on Chicago baseball. I'll tell you one thing, though. We were just there, as I said, a couple of days ago, and the Bears were playing at home, of course.
Yes.
And had a good game against the Saints. And I saw all the Bears fans walking down the sidewalk and had a chance to interact with a few of them. They're great fans. They're so excited about the team. And I love the sports traditions of Chicago. It is a sports town, and I love sports, so I'm really looking forward to being a part of all that.
Okay, I got one more for you. Italian beef. They call it wet. That means when you dip it in all the juices. Or Chicago hot dog. You can't have ketchup on it. Which one? Italian beef or the Chicago hot dog?
I'm going to go with the hot dog. It sounds a little simpler to me, and I kind of like simple food.
I feel like you're my kind of guy, Mr. Kirby. I do. I feel like we would be good friends. All right. Any final words before we let you go? It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you this afternoon.
Oh, it's been my pleasure too. I can't tell you, just honestly, I'll say it again, how excited I am to start this new job at such a world-class institution as the University of Chicago, with a truly global reputation for excellence. And then, of course, the Institute of Politics, which is the crown jewel in this country for a place where dialogue and discussion and debate can be done in a civil way. And I think that's so desperately needed right now in this country. And I just can't wait to be a part of it. Likewise, I can't wait to just be a Chicagoan. I can't wait to actually live in the city and feel it and really be a part of it.
who's to decide who should govern? If there is no shared experience, then how do we decide what policy should be? How do we avoid just falling back on political tribe or worse, political violence? If there is no truth, if there is no fact, if there is no accountability. And so, Senator Merkley, I thank you for shedding a light on the risk to our precious democracy, the risk to this incredible inheritance from our founders. Because part and parcel of saving our republic, part and parcel of saving this country is to understand the dangers so that we can confront them. Future generations are going to ask what we did in this hour when our democracy was most vulnerable, when our parents and their parents went off to world wars to protect our democracy. Our task